And the final thing I would call imaginary governance. And this is kind of goes to the bottom to what we just addressed with the questions of moral or the question of ideological foundation. So why should we care about climate change? What motivates us? And one way to think about this is forget about climate change as an environmental issue. Think about climate change as a highly social political issue. Climate change is an issue that is a door opener, maybe, for also social change. So forget about, for a moment, the kind of environmental threat it poses, but think about what are the social implications when we deal with climate change. And then you can think about what would a community or what would a society, what would our nation or your nation look like if we address climate change? Does it mean that we still move around in cars with electric vehicles, like individually, or does it mean more public transport and more community organized transportation system? So it's kind of a broader question you're tackling and what kind of values and norms you have in society. One example of this, and here comes the video again, I think. Okay, and I think we need to tune down the volume again and start, and I'll say stop when you need to stop it. So there is the city of Ghent. Okay, stop. Oh, too late. You need to be very quick. Okay, just a bit. Yeah, okay, this is good. So here's the city of Ghent. Does anyone know where Ghent is? Well, it says Belgium, yeah, okay. Well, I didn't really know before where this is, so, to be honest. So Ghent, this little city in Belgium, about 260,000 inhabitants. And they have a problem that many cities face. Or I put it this way, what would you say is Jakarta's biggest problem when it comes to transportation, when it comes to mobility? Traffic. Why there's so much traffic? Okay, I hear too many drive a car, but maybe I hear voices. Transportation, you can pick up people. Okay, yeah, perfect. And so it's a very easy or kind of obvious observation, particularly if there's only one person in the car, how much room a car needs and a motorcycle or cycle or pedestrian actually use it. So the city of Ghent, small one, but also had the same problem. And they were frustrated with cars, individual cars driving around. And they wanted to get rid of the cars in the city. So what they did is they created 6 different parts of the city. And the trick was that you cannot go with your car from one area to the other. So, for example, if you're in this area, you cannot cross this line. You always have to go back to the ring road. So the ring road is the road around the city. And this makes driving a car quite a frustrating experience. So if you, for example, if you're here and you want to go here, you need to go all the way around and come here back in. Well, some people would do this, but the expectation and the hope was that many people say, no, I will use public transport or I will cycle or simply move. So use my feet. Okay, and now you can move on with a video. Because so the inner city center is completely car-free, so just for individual cars, for personal cars. And here is what I just meant. And no, just you can just continue. Thank you. Here's your car, and you want to cross this line. It's not possible. So there are kind of structures that prevent cars to move from one area to another. And you move all the way down this way. So there are obviously simpler ways to do this. This is the ring road. And people expected, okay, there will be much more traffic than on the ring road. but that didn't happen. So it was a concern raised by, particularly by conservatives, that these cars will just move to another place, but this didn't happen. So overall, you saw a quite drastic reduction in car mobility in the city. Now, what you see here is obviously it comes together with an advanced public transport system. It comes with these barriers to really keep cars out of the city. And what they also did is to create new spaces for pedestrians, for people to enjoy actually the city. So it's not a car-centric city anymore. It's more, well, a people-centered city where people can walk around, where people can use the spaces more as, and maybe you can stop here or just stop, because I found this an interesting, just a bit further. Yeah, okay. So I can't really expect this in Berlin, but think about this in Jakarta. Think about a road where cars have to stop because cyclists always go first. Imagine. So this is what they do. So it's kind of, it's a whole range of options you have, right? Through physical structures, through regulating traffic, and all the way to changing a mindset and creating a different city that provides opportunities for people to relax, for people to enjoy the city without the car. Okay, you can move forward. Thank you. I think there's not much more coming, but they had a goal. So in 2012, there were 22% of transportation used by, okay, you can stop, used by cyclists, by cycling. And they had a goal until I hope I remember now the numbers. They had a goal to achieve 35% by 2030, which they achieved already in 2019. So overall, yeah, you can see that 1/3 of all transportation and of all mobility patterns is covered by cycling. And of course, also a huge chunk goes to public transport, and the smaller chunk to private vehicles. So this is kind of a success story. One can learn from, one can adapt. One can also say that, well, Jakarta is a little bit different with a few more people living here, but it shows you maybe the kind of what, if you're creative, the availability of different options you have to change an entire system. And also, again, there was a lot of resistance. People are getting used to their cars, obviously have strong resistance against switching to cycles. And there's a lot of, I mean, psychologists can talk much better about this than I can, but there are many different triggers you have to bring people and move to a different mode of transportation. And maybe coming back to this question of democratic versus authoritarian, one might say, okay, the government has imposed strict regulations, but on the other hand, you can also say, well, it's not forbidding cars. It's not like stopping people from using their cars. They can still use their cars, but just makes it difficult for them and useful to use their cars. So it's another approach. Okay. Next slide. And what is this? You know this better than I. Okay, this is your new capital. Maybe next year, you'll see. And here again, we can think about it from what is actually the purpose of this city. And here you have the chance to start from scratch and think about what you prioritize. Actually, what I see is there's still quite a lot of huge streets, so I'm not sure if it's really that much on public transport, but they want to have it 100% renewable energy powered. They have some kind of visions, and we can see in how far this really materializes. But actually, these kind of projects also give you the opportunity to think about how you organize your life and how you organize society more fundamentally. And not only to tackle climate change, but also to think about, and I think this is much more important for Jakarta, for example, think about air pollution due to car mobility. So, as I said, if tackling climate change is such a challenging thing, then maybe think about tackling climate change as a social issue, as a political issue, rather than an environmental one. And also as an economic one, if you think about who can create new businesses and new business ideas. Okay, I'd rather run quickly through this. One more thing I would like to highlight is that no matter how we govern climate change, the key question is how can we sustain, how we can institutionalize action. So how can we create new institutions that are different from the business as usual trajectory here. Here's a negative example. So this is a classical white elephant. So a development project. Here, this is in the Philippines, but you probably also have it in all around Asia and all around the world. So a foreign donor, actually a German one. So the Germans did this. Okay, here we go. Trying to implement solar power in very remote rural areas. And what happened after 2, 3, 10 years is that the system collapsed and there created a lot of non-recyclable waste, but it didn't create any structures around it. And it was not embedded into the political structure. So as public administration scholars, I think you're very aware of that the quality of your public administration depends on capacity, depends on knowledge, depends on education, depends on a whole range of issues. But if you don't have the environment to, for example, take care of such a project or actually to sustain such a project, then it becomes challenging. And then we have a lot of nice initiatives, a lot of nice projects, but actually, you can be very proud of choosing public administration because it all comes down in sustaining these efforts when there's a good administrative system to take care of it, to sustain it, to give out permits, to regulate it, to hold people accountable, and so on. So this is obviously what is missing here. So sustaining change means institutionalization, institutionalize efforts and creating new institutions. And I think I really go quickly through this, if it works. It doesn't. Okay. And if we think about coming back to climate change and low carbon development, the challenge is how we move from a high carbon intensive development rules like subsidies for fossil fuels, certain prioritization of coal power, for example, to gradually move to more sustainable options, to low carbon options. And yeah, I think it's not too interesting anymore, but it means to have implementation capacity. It means to create new organizations, change old habits in ministries, for example, and also to have have a different discourse on institutionalization. 3 things I would like to stop with or to end with is how this institutionalization can have different avenues. So there's a classical incremental reformist approach. So you gradually change from one system to another. And we see this in India, for example, that had a massive expansion of solar power over recent decades, but it also took time. So and it took these gigantic couple of 100 megawatts up to gigawatts projects to implement and to learn from these projects and to create new policies, to create new subsidies and to create new incentive structures. Another way would be to think about outside the box and to think about how to sustain the project we have just seen. This is basically the same technology, but implemented in another context. And what this donor, and this time it was the US donor, did, it was to build a community system around it. So it was not only providing technology, but thinking about how this could be embedded in daily routines and local community organizations. So this is more of a new institutions to be developed. However, and I'll stop with this, what we see most often, if we see it, we see institutional resistance. So a lot of resistance from coal industry, from fossil fuel industry, from the car industry, whoever benefits from high emissions system to move to a low emission system is challenging. And here we have an example that is actually globally relevant. Not sure if you've heard of the Yasuni initiative. And this is actually very simple. So the Ecuadorian government in, what was it, 2014 or something, said, okay, there's a lot of oil underneath our tropical rainforest, but we will keep it there. But you have to compensate us with 50% of the money we would actually get when we would extract this oil. So sounds like a fair deal. So you get environmental protection, but we also get a compensation. The whole system collapsed, not only because international donors said, like, no, we don't want to give money, but also because there was a lot of resistance within Ecuador. So in the end, they started extracting oil from this national park. All right, and that was it, I think. So thank you very much for your participation and also for keeping in mind that I'll context you directly.